All right, thank you for joining me. Today I have Dr. Ismail. We're going to be reacting to LEGN. It's a company that focuses on multiple myeloma, and we have an oncologist. He's a board-certified oncologist, and he's here to join us today to just kind of explain a little bit about and different treatments and how serious of a disease it is. And Doctor, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I wanted to start off by telling you about the multiple myeloma. Basically, it is a condition where, put in layman terms, is a cancer of the blood, and it arises from what we call the plasma cell. Plasma cells, in turn, give rise to antibodies that fight off infections on a regular basis. Sometimes when we have certain mutations that can occur, this can lead to abnormal production of these plasma cells. And when this occurs, that's when we have a condition called multiple myeloma. Unfortunately, multiple myeloma is a cancer of the blood that is not curable, but there's been leaps and bounds in terms of the treatment that we've noticed over the past couple of years. There's treatments that have prolonged life. Initially, we would tell patients, we would quote them about a 3-year survival. Now patients are living beyond 10 years. Maybe I have patients who are alive 17, 18 years later and still doing pretty good. So,
is multiple myeloma pretty common? Is it a common disease, and how many people are affected worldwide?
It's not that common of a disease, but we're seeing a higher trend, especially in the United States, and it is higher in the African American population.
Okay. What's the current treatment landscape for multiple myeloma right now?
So right now, the current treatment which is the standard of care, is to provide patients with chemotherapy. So it's divided into three main phases. Number one phase is induction, which is induction chemotherapy, trying to kill all the abnormal plasma cells as much as we can, followed by transplant, and then that's followed by what we call maintenance therapy, which is usually giving a pill or a lower form of this treatment that we have given initially. So those are the three phases: the induction phase, the transplant phase, and the maintenance phase. Usually patients, they do go into remission, but unfortunately, depending on how severe the disease is, it depends upon how long that remission lasts.
How does cellular therapy work, and where does it fit in all this?
So cellular therapy, also known as CAR T therapy, initially started with a condition called ALL, or acute lymphocytic leukemia, which usually occurs in children. This was developed out of Pennsylvania, and this was a groundbreaking treatment in where patients were given cell-specific therapy, and patients had great results. The way it works is basically cells are taken from the patient. They're basically engineered to fight off the cancer cells. Cancer cells have certain proteins which these cells are honed to fight off.
And they take their own blood, right? Like this is
so
different from the allogenic cell therapy.
Correct. So that's allogeneic stem cell transplant, which at this point does not have a real big role in multiple myeloma. Even when I did mention the transplant before, that was more of an auto transplant. And again, the auto transplant, just for briefly, is taking one's own cells. But this is a little different. This is engineering those cells. So those cells are taken, they're engineered, and they're reintroduced into the patient, and so they know specifically which cells to go after.
So this chart kind of breaks down what they do, right? So they take the patient's own blood here, then
Correct.
they separate the blood and the plasma, right? They have that.
Correct. They're looking specifically for T cells. So
Okay.
what they have, so they separate, and they engineer the T cell through what we call a vector, which is a virus, and they inject DNA material into that, and then that is how they engineer the cells.
Do you think that CAR T cell therapy will become more commonplace?
It already is becoming more commonplace. It has gained approval for many other diseases, such as what we call diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, and it is gaining strength in the myeloma world as well. And it has there are some approved conditions. There's not all CAR Ts are created equal. There are different CAR Ts, and some have been already approved for multiple myeloma. Okay,
so this company here, they recently received approval, and I'll kind of get your reaction here. So they received approval for a treatment with patients that have relapsed or refractory multiple myeloma, and who received 4 or more prior lines of therapy. That means that they were treated with 4 different types of therapy. They didn't have success with those 4 therapies. So now this company has approval to treatment with the CAR T therapy. Is that what that means?
Correct. So usually with before CAR T had come, like I said, we used to do induction, which was chemotherapy, transplant, and maintenance. But that remission did not last for a long time, and then patients would need another line of treatment. So we go on to second line, third line, fourth line, even fifth line. But now with the advent of CAR T, this has changed somewhat, and has given us a great option. And if we extrapolate the data from what we see from diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, patients, even with multiple lines of treatment, respond fairly well. This is in strike contrast to patients who receive chemotherapy. With each cell line that they receive, their response rates are lower and lower. So CAR T has given us oncologists a lot of hope.
So this company here, they have a pretty high overall response rate of 98%.
Yeah, that's unheard of. Yeah,
that's one of the reasons this company stuck out. And it was actually a good buddy of mine, Dr. Dean. He first started talking about it, and he asked me to also like look into it.
Sure.
was because of the results of the 98% overall response, and 78% of those that after 4 different types of treatment received a complete response.
Right.
What's the difference between overall response and complete response?
So overall response just reveals the response rate, but it doesn't mean that all the disease is gone. Complete response pretty much means that all the disease is not visible anymore. Although there are certain types of ways that we can check, which is something called MRD, or minimal residual disease, which really tells us how much disease is left over. A complete response is basically telling us there's no evidence of any myeloma left over, and which is fairly exciting to be honest, especially in this field.
But complete response doesn't mean that you're cured, right? You can still come back in the future.
Complete response pretty much means undetectable disease.
Okay. Or what's the average lifespan for someone that has complete response? Do they usually live a lot longer?
So complete response, they live a lot longer if it's usually in the first. So what we call first complete response, patients have a higher response or higher survival rates. But with each, and it's harder to be honest, it's harder to receive complete response with later lines of therapy. So this is a game changer, especially after 4 lines of treatment, getting this high of an overall response rate as well as a complete response rate.
Yeah. So this company here, they partnered up with J&J, and this is kind of a little bit of their timeline. One of the criticism with CAR T therapy is the cost. Is it extremely expensive?
It is extremely expensive. And without insurance approval and aid, it's very difficult to maintain treatment.
Yeah, I read some estimates that some treatments go up to $450,000, which
correct
yeah.
At the very least.
Yeah,
and you also have to factor in the costs that occur with potential side effects that may occur with this as well.
So another issue with this recent approval, which so this company, the stock price went down, although they got approval. They said that 10% of the patient had a neurotoxicity reaction, and the FDA gave them a black box warning, which is what does it mean when you have a drug that has like a black box warning? As far as you, does that scare you away?
Yeah, definitely. Black box warning. That whenever we see that, that's heightens our response or heightens our attention to that specific side effect that potentially may occur. In terms of trials, in terms of approvals, usually drugs are approved based on their response and the side effect profile. If the side effect profile is very severe, obviously they don't ever make it to the market. So whenever we see a black box warning, it's not that we don't give the medication, but we always take caution when giving it.
So is it kind of like, because that 10% is pretty high.
Correct.
I mean, and how serious is a neurotoxicity reaction?
Neurotoxicity can be very, very severe. Also, what does occur is what we call CRS, or cytokine release syndrome, and that is very severe as well and can be life-threatening.
In my mind, 10% seems high, but is it that this is so important, like especially after receiving 4 different types of treatment, that it kind of the good outweighs the bad, where, okay, you know what, there's a 10% chance of neurotoxicity, but they tried already 4 different treatments. Now we try this, which has a 78% success rate.
That's exactly what I tell my patients. It's all, I mean, all type of treatment, it depends upon the benefits and risks. That's the important ratio. So the benefits are still much higher than the risks are. 10%, although it is not negligible, but it's not as high as the benefits are going to be.
And here, and the platform, this is kind of like taking your own blood versus someone donating blood plasma, right? Blood.
Correct. So CAR T is usually always synonymously known with taking your own blood and engineering that through a gene vector.
Is that safer? Because when I think of allogenic therapy, I think of possibly like graft versus host. What if they don't accept the blood, and then that can be pretty fatal, right?
That can be fatal in itself. Correct. But again, that's in a different genre. That's in a different type of treatment. That's more for acute leukemias. It doesn't really correspond that much with CAR T, but that is a big factor. Graft versus host disease can be, again, like we said, fatal. I think this is extremely exciting, especially from an oncologist point of view. This is going to give our patients great hope, especially after 4 lines of treatment. This is unheard of. We always, although we try to encourage our patients, but after 4 to 5 lines, it becomes really difficult to achieve a substantial response. So this, obviously, overall response of 98% is amazing. And this can be in comparison to when we give treatment after 4 to 5 lines. If we get a response rate of 30 to 40%, we are very happy with that.
So hearing complete response of 78% must be great news for the oncologist.
Correct.
So the good thing, so for me as an investor, I'm optimistic about this. The only issue is this is extremely expensive for the company, right? So if you look at their financials, their revenue versus what they have to spend on research and development, they can't keep profit yet. So I think long term, it's going to be a while before this company is a strong investment. But I think for the cancer, for the long term, for the cancer world, there's a lot of competition. So, but that competition is good for the patient, right?
Definitely. I mean, it's going to drive down the costs and hopefully give patients and doctors more choices.
These are different tests. So this is triple refractory, right? This is like three types of treatment.
3 lines of treatment. And usually, like we said, the response rates with each line of therapy dwindles. And so receiving a therapy that gives us hope and actually has a response rate around more than 90% is amazing. It gives a lot of hope for our patients and for us.
So that's been their focus on patients that receive 3 or 4 more treatments. They've done also studies on patients that receive 5 different treatments, which is quite a lot, right? I mean,
five lines, I mean, we have around 7 to 8 lines, but usually response rates are negligible when we get to the 5th line or so.
Yeah, and then I guess this is kind of what excited a lot of people, where they had over 80% success rate on these patients. So this is another thing they had in the pipeline, but this got placed on hold. This is CD4s, surface membrane. So what type of cancer are they targeting with this?
So CD4 is more what we call ALL. For example, like what we were talking about was CD19. CD19 is basically a cell surface protein that the T cells go after, and that's how they do most of their killing. So CD4 is just another specific cell surface protein that they go after.
But it's something that they had in their pipeline that their FDA phase 1 trial got put on hold. Right. And it sent the stock going down, and the reason it got
what did they say? Yeah, I'm not familiar with the study. What did they say was the reason for
that? Right here. So the study comes hold after the first patient treated with the cell therapy experienced a low CD4 plus T cell counts.
Okay, so this is similar to what we see in AIDS when we have a low CD4 count, and so if you could just imagine in patients with AIDS, the immunity is decreased, and they're susceptible to all these what we call opportunistic infections that we fight off on a regular basis because of our regular immunity.
That was it. This patient had a low count, so they just put the study on hold. This patient didn't have any other severe reactions other than this blood work.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. No, so I think this is just a phase 1 study. So I think maybe tweaking the dose or amount of cells, I think that may be able to alleviate the problems that they're seeing. But again, it's just a phase 1. So
that was just a basic summary of the company. I think right now for me, they're a little bit expensive. They have a market cap of over $5 billion with only 140 million shares trading at $41. But if you believe that there's a lot more potential, you may want to buy and hold. I'm hoping with our current market conditions and possible recession that this stock price falls. If it
Yeah,
falls anywhere below $30, it did fall
it
before.
would be a steal. Yeah,
It would,
I think it would be a steal.
yeah, it fell down here $30 and got bought right back up. So
Right.
if it
No, I
does
mean,
fall, I would
yeah,
like to
this
see it
company
fall.
definitely has potential.
Any last thoughts on CAR T therapy and these results? Your standpoint on it?
Yeah, so I mean, in summary, or to be very honest, this is CAR T is basically the wave of the future, and that's how eventually we're going to treat a lot of our cancers. Is through, I mean, especially what we call the heme malignancies, is through CAR T. I mean, you're already seeing great results in patients with lymphomas, and now we're seeing good results in the initial phases of multiple myeloma as well. So I think, especially this company, I think it's something to watch for. Put it on your watch list and keep an eye on it.
Do you think that in the future it would be a first or second line of treatment, or is that long away?
I think that's a long way, but it's definitely going to move higher up. I don't think it's going to be fourth line. It might be even second or third line at some point, depending upon, especially if the response rates are good, well as depending upon side effect profile. So all these things are important. Also, I mean, you can't make a blanket statement either. All patients are not the same, and all multiple myeloma is not the same. There are some patients where you can give treatment for a long time and keep them away from potential side effects. Where other patients who, no matter what you do, they keep on progressing and progressing. So in those patients, this CAR T therapy might be more apt to do better. And
yeah. So I'm going to close it here with just kind of a price prediction. And I have three different theses. What I call downside, base, and upside. If you're bearish, we'll type down here downside, and this will factor in all the downside numbers. And we go down here. If you're bearish on this, and there are people, this is heavily shorted, and the reason it's heavily shorted because they don't believe that it's going to have much revenue growth. Well, they'll say that the stock should be trading at $3. If you're happy with the revenue growth now, and you think that they're going to maintain the growth and maybe grow another 1 or 2% per year, then it has a 10% upside. And if you're extremely bullish, like they announced how much revenue growth they think they're going to how much they're going to grasp, and you think that they're going to grow significantly over the next few years, especially with their recent approval, then there's a 54% upside at $64. Just, I'm not invested in it yet. I would like to see it drop more, but those are the three different theses: bearish, base, and upside. Upside, the company, obviously, this is what they believe that they're going to obtain over the next few years, especially with their partnership with J&J and their recent approval. So those are just three different theses. You choose, you do your own due diligence. Thanks again, Dr. Ismail, for coming on. Really appreciate you.
thank you for having me.
And see you on the next video, guys.
Thank you so much. Take care.